starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting for November 18th, 2020. Could we please have roll call?
You will in a second. Sorry.
Okay. No, it's okay.
Chair Clark,
Here.
Vice Chair McGill,
Here.
Commissioner Baker, Commissioner Lesnar Buxton,
You.
Commissioner Longstreet,
Here.
Commissioner Martinez Cohen,
Here.
Commissioner Perry.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any suggested changes to the agenda?
Chair Clark, no, we don't.
Okay, great. And do we have any written communications that we need to discuss? No? Okay. So that brings us to public comment. Rose, would you please put thank you, information about public comment? Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Parks and Recreation Commission. The screen went down, so I don't have it to read now. But if you look at the screen, there's information on how to make an oral public comment.
So for those who wish to speak during public comment, please use the raise your hand functionality in the GoToWebinar control panel. We are currently displaying a graphic showing where that is located. When I call on you, please unmute yourself and then speak for a maximum of 2 minutes. For those who wish to speak on an agenda item later in the meeting, please raise your hand when the item is under discussion. And I do not see any raised hands. So.
Okay, great. And we'll skip over Youth Council report. From what I understand, we don't have a Youth Council representative here today. And that'll bring us to our Commissioner Committee assignment reports. I'll start with Vice Chair McGill.
Thank you. Park Foundation did not meet this month. I understand we will be meeting soon to talk about basically budget and way forward.
Thank you. Commissioner Longstreet.
I attended the Neighborhood Advisory Council meeting. They celebrated their 10-year anniversary, which I think just seems shocking that it's been 10 years since we formed that committee. And the base of their meeting was about the CDBG grants. There was a presentation from Parks and Recreation staff on the projects that they're presenting to the board. I missed the sea level rise on the 4th. But I did attend today's sea level rise meeting, and the committee is finalizing the edits and recommendations for a city council. We'll be meeting again on the 9th to go over the final recommendations, and that will then go on to council for adoption, hopefully.
Thank you. Commissioner Martinez Cohen.
Yeah, the Creeks Advisory Committee meeting was scheduled for today at the same time, or actually at 5:30 today, but they canceled that meeting. And the next regularly scheduled meeting will be Wednesday, December 16th at 5:30.
Thank you. Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
I attended the Youth Council meeting. This was selecting new members, and they're working on possible activities for the spring.
Thank you. I was unable to attend a special meeting of the Integrated Pest Management Committee, but I did read the agenda in the packet, and it looks like that they reviewed and approved their 2019 IPM, that's Integrated Pest Management Annual Report. And they approved the interim IPM annual report for the reporting period of January 1st to the 30th of 2020. And then they reviewed and approved the 2021 IPM annual plan. From what I read, it looks like the Integrated Pest Management Committee is really being proactive and continuing to try to make this a green city. But they do make exemptions, programmatic exemptions when necessary for pesticides and herbicides. I also attended, it was an online Ortega master plan update for the community. It looked like it was well attended. And I thought that Rich Hanna and Justin did a really good job doing a presentation on the Ortega Park master plan and eliciting continued feedback from the community that the park will serve. So kudos to both of them. That brings us to commission and staff communications. Do we have any, Ms. Zachary?
Chair Clark and commissioners, just a few things. It's been a while since I used this item on the agenda, just to give you a few brief updates, not items that are on your agenda for discussion, but items that I'd like to share with you as part of the meeting. First of all, thank you, Chair Clark, for mentioning our community webinar on Ortega Park. Ricardo Venegas was also a presenter, and he really played a role in talking about murals and mural art. And then I recently reached out to the commission to let you know that we'll be at the Planning Commission on December 3rd. This is an important hearing for the project, as we will be going for Planning Commission approval. The commission made its findings on the project back in September, so the commission's recommendations will be shared with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission also does have a site visit, and they will have a site visit. Their site visits are usually at 8 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, the Tuesday before the Planning Commission hearing. Planning Commission is at 1 o'clock. And certainly we'll share with you the staff report as we get closer to that date. And then once we move, hopefully we'll be able to move into the second phase. Also want to mention that the City Council postponed the appeal for the tree until December 8th. So we have nothing to report to you on that at this moment. And then you met Andrew Bermond, a new staff person at your last meeting. I also just wanted to inform you that we now have an assistant Parks and Recreation director who you will be able to meet in the near future. Jasmine LeBlanc joined our team last Monday. And some other staff that we hope once we get into 2021, since it seems like the GoToWebinar format's continuing, have the opportunity to introduce and bring forward new staff in Parks and Recreation. And then lastly, I also would like to, in the future, bring to you a status report on where we are in our budget, because we are beginning to work on the next 2-year plan and also looking at what's happening in fiscal year 21. The Finance Committee of the City Council did get a first quarter report last Tuesday on how the city's doing in consideration of the challenges associated with the coronavirus pandemic. And as we see, things aren't changing anytime soon. We'll be projecting out how the new calendar year will look for Parks and Recreation as well. So just wanted to give you a few brief verbal updates, nothing to discuss, but to let you know that there's some things we bring forward in the near future.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Zachary. That brings us to employee recognition service award pins, which is Jill again.
Chair Clark and commissioners, we had one employee that was recognized for his years of service, and that is Ignacio Valdez, who was recognized for 20 years of service in the Parks and Recreation Department. He currently serves as a grounds maintenance crew leader. And so he actually began as a grounds maintenance worker, then became a lead and became a senior, and then became a lead. So he's progressed through his career in the department and plays a critical role in a lot of the sort of back of house operations, working with our staff to repair and prepare park sites, make maintenance adjustments, support other parks division teams in order to advance our objectives in providing service to the public out in the open spaces.
Thank you. On behalf of the entire commission, we'd like to thank Mr. Valdez for his service and commitment to the department. 20 years is impressive. It's commendable. So thank you, Mr. Valdez. And that brings us to the minutes. I assume we all received them and read them. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I move
Oh,
that we accept the minutes as, oh, sorry.
Doesn't matter.
I think you have a motion in a second.
Yes.
All right. I'll say, I think Commissioner Longstreet started the motion and Vice Chair McGill seconded it. Thank you. And that brings us to our Street Tree Advisory Committee items. And I did forget in my commissioner assignment report that I did attend that meeting virtually. And here's
Chair
Mr.
Clark?
Slack to talk. Mhm.
Sure, we did not have a vote on the minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved. And now we can welcome Mr. Slack.
Good afternoon, Chair Clark and Commissioners. Could we advance to the next slide, please? Next slide. Thank you. The first Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove a New Zealand Christmas tree located at 7 South Milpas Street. This is a street tree request for removal. Some of the members may remember back in December 12th of 2018 during the regular Parks and Recreation Commission meeting, we reviewed a project just to the south of this. This is where the new Sprouts complex is. And at that meeting, 7 New Zealand Christmas trees were approved for removal, street trees, and also a code designation was made to allow for the use of Queen Palm as a alternative street tree substitution for the existing New Zealand Christmas tree in front of the development just to the south of this. The applicant has returned requesting that the last New Zealand Christmas tree be removed in front of the Carl's Jr. and plant a new Queen Palm for consistency with the rest of the developmental improvements in front of the shopping center just to the south of the tree's location. The committee reviewed the tree, the application, and also heard comments from the project landscape architect. There was some discussion about the validity of removing the tree. Some members felt that the tree was in really good health and there was a lot of value in the retention of the tree, but ultimately after review, the committee made a motion to approve the removal of the New Zealand Christmas tree at 7 South Milpas Street.
Thank you, Mr. Slack. Do we have any questions? Would anyone like to make a motion?
If there's no public speakers, I'll make a motion.
That's right. Thank you, Vice Chair McGill, for reminding me of that. Ms. Navarez, do you have any public speakers?
I do not see any raised hands. Anyone who would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. There are no raised hands.
Okay, then I will make a motion that we approve the recommendation to remove the New Zealand Christmas tree on the condition that it be replaced with a matching Queen Palm as proposed.
Second.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion? Okay, I just have one comment is that I do wish this tree had been originally included when we reviewed this last year. I find it really hard when developers come to us with a project and they give us one chunk of tree at a time. I don't think it's the best way to approach redeveloping a piece of property, but that's what happened this time. And I'm hoping that if we keep squeaking about it, that in the future we'll come to a time where we don't have trees piecemealed away in a development. With that, I'll call a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's just me. So moved.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove a Canary Island date palm located at 1440 Pacific Avenue. This also is a street tree removal request, and the tree is actually located on the Santa Rosa Avenue side of the property. The request for removal is due to the applicant building an accessory dwelling unit on their property. The accessory dwelling unit, the driveway access is going to exit onto Santa Rosa Avenue, and the only feasible location that they could identify for the ADU was in the vicinity where the palm tree is located. The committee reviewed the application, conducted site visits, had some discussion about the driveway, the positioning, and if there was any possibility of moving the driveway to retain the tree. We had also been in contact with Transportation Division staff, and there was just simply no way to construct the driveway while allowing for retention of the tree. The committee ultimately made a motion to approve the removal with a condition that 2 new street trees be planted on the Santa Rosa side of the property. And just for reference, the designated street tree is a New Zealand Christmas tree.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Slack? Vice Chair McGill?
Yeah, and that's a pretty dense area up there. And I just was wondering where you were thinking the street trees would go.
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, there was some discussion during the meeting about that, and we've had some follow-up discussion with the applicant as well. I think that there's certainly at least one spot specifically on the parcel for a street tree, and then I think we would evaluate after construction of the new driveways if we can accommodate 2 street trees. If not, it'll just be within the vicinity of the project as close to the parcel as possible. And we've had that conversation with the applicant.
Okay, yeah, I just, even the parking up there is like crazy.
Do you have any more questions? Okay, Ms. Navarez, are there any members of the public who would like to speak to this agenda item?
Chair Clark, I do not see any raised hands.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion? Okay, I will make a motion. Yes.
I would move that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation at 1440 Pacific Avenue for the removal of the Canary Island date palm for replacement with 2 street trees to location to be determined. And we're doing this because it is a practical development of the property.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Moved?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the last Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove 3 American sweet gums located within the front setback at 115 Coronado Circle. This project, or this request was previously reviewed, I believe maybe 14 months ago. I don't have the date in front of me. I apologize about that. The applicant is requesting the removal of the sweet gums due to disease-related concerns. The photograph on the left does illustrate that the tree closest to the property is in a pretty significant state of decline. We suspect there's probably a couple fungal pathogens present within the tree that's causing the decline. The committee evaluated all 3 trees, and during discussion commented that the 2 trees towards the front of the property were still in pretty good health, and there was lots of merit in retention of those 2 trees given their current condition, but that the tree furthest back or closest to the property or the house was in a state of decline that did warrant removal. After discussion and review, the committee made a recommendation to approve the removal of the declining tree and deny the removal of the existing 2 trees with the condition that a new street tree be planted in the adjacent parkway next to the property. The applicant did express a desire to not replace the trees on the property, and I think as a sort of a happy medium, the committee made the recommendation to condition a street tree as opposed to condition a tree located specifically on the parcel. And during the review, the committee determined that the commission could make the finding that principles of good forest management will be best served by the proposed removal.
Thank you, Mr. Slack. Do we have any questions?
Just a couple of questions. I'm trying to remember back without actually dredging through notes to when we talked about this last, but didn't we ask questions about the comments, being asked to address the problem? Did we not ask about them bringing in a professional arborist and having them look at it? Did that come up at all? It seems to me we had asked for a little bit more homework on this one at one point.
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, that could be. I did not watch the meeting in advance of this meeting. There was not a specific request to come back with additional information from an arborist. There certainly could have been talking points about the validity of consulting an arborist. I know the applicant also with the previous landscape maintenance company did consult with a certified arborist before submitting the initial request. There was a certified arborist for the landscape maintenance company, Kitson, that had provided some guidance in regards to the trees on the initial application.
Maybe that's what I'm remembering. And then the other question I had is there's a comment in here, which I'm not finding as I look through this quickly, about not being able to remove one tree and grind the stump without doing severe damage to the other trees. Can you comment on that?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill. Yeah, so the trees are very close to one another, and when trees grow that close to one another, it's very common for the root systems to intermingle and even fuse. And so if that tree was removed and the stump was ground all the way down like to a common depth of like 12, 18 inches, there's a probability that depending on the full like radius or diameter of the amount of stump grinding that occurred, that you could be damaging or injuring roots of the adjacent trees as well. I think if you were going to remove this tree, probably the most prudent approach in terms of making sure that there was not damage done to the other 2 trees would be to just cut the stump really low and just avoid stump grinding altogether.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Did you, I was just wondering, Mr. Slack, have you had a chance to talk to the property owners about the recommendation of the Street Tree Advisory Committee?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I was able to connect with the applicant today in advance of the meeting. We had a very nice conversation, and there's a likelihood that she may be on the meeting to make public comment. We discussed the committee's review and the condition and also other options. You know, there's the tree's vigor has declined obviously within a year's time, but they certainly could go into sort of a maintenance and monitoring as well. They don't necessarily have to take action. Even if the commission were to approve the removal with condition, they could, you know, they're currently watering the trees and they've taken really good care of them. And so, you know, there's other options. We discussed the possibility of even retaining the tree and just sort of managing its decline for a period of years. I think the applicant's also somewhat motivated in removing more than just the one, obviously, because they've requested the removal a couple times. But we did discuss it. We talked about the likely pathogens and the fact that they really don't cause structural concern. It does cause decline of the tree, but it's not something like a root rot where we would be concerned about, real safety related concerns. So we had a really nice conversation today.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Slack. If there are no more questions from this commission, I will ask Rose if there is anybody to speak on this agenda item from the public.
Chair Clark, yes, we have Karen McElwain. Ms. McElwain, if you can unmute yourself, you will have 2 minutes to speak.
Welcome.
Let's see. Okay, let's try it now. Okay, Ms. McElwain, you are still self-muted. Oh, goodness. Well, it looks like we're having some technical difficulties.
Maybe we can describe what the panel looks like, that she has to pop out and hit the picture of the microphone. Or she could try to join the call by phone.
Or she could also type in a question if she would like to do it that way, if she's having technical difficulties.
Mm-hmm. Do we have a phone number we can give her to call for support?
No, there is a phone number on her registration that she can use to dial in. That I do not have a separate phone number for her to call in.
So Karen, you probably got an email that says, "Thank you for registering to speak." And on that email, there should be a phone number.
I don't know what there was a question, but it's not, it's not clear. It says call and then M. We cannot call you. So I don't know what you are trying to say. Oh my goodness.
Karen, if you have access to your email, if you could look for the email that you got when you registered to speak, there should be a dial-in phone number on that email.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, if I could, I was able to get the, so it was the July 24th, 2019 meeting when we reviewed those initial trees on Coronado Circle, and the motion does not indicate any formal request to obtain an arborist information. So it must have just been during discussion.
Okay. Well, I guess we could give the applicant time to work on. Ms. Zachary, did you want to say something?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I suggested to Ms. Navarez that the applicant email either me or Nathan Slack, and we read the question or comment that she has, which means the commission might need to wait a moment for that to occur as a way to try to make sure that she had an opportunity to make comment on this item.
That's a great idea. Should we give her time, or should we'll go to the director's report and then come back to this agenda item? Give her a couple minutes first.
Chair Clark, either way, if you'd like me to go to the director's report and then return to this item, that might give us enough time to secure her input.
Okay. Yeah, I think her input's really important. So let's move to the director's report. And when we're done with that, we'll circle back and see if we found her.
So Chair Clark, and I just sent her log on too. So in the chat, in the question area, so hopefully she can access it that way as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Chair Clark and Commissioners, I have a few things that I'd like to share with the Commission regarding activities of the Parks and Recreation Department in the last month, and that we actually are still pursuing despite some of the delays in resolving our COVID pandemic. The first is our ongoing efforts to facilitate members of the community and visitors to use our facilities and to be able to explore those facilities online, determine the feasibility that they have for an event they might have. And one of the things we did is we contracted with a company called All Seated. And what it does is it provides an online system for floor planning and for all rental facilities. And so clients are able to design how they might use the space based on the dimensions and the number of people that they have. They're able to work with their vendors, whether they're caterers or florists or other event planners, to figure out how to do the configuration. It gives the hospitality industry the opportunity to also advance market their services and our facilities. And then most recently, with social distancing, with the idea that at some point it will be okay for small numbers of people to congregate indoors, how to do that in a way that promotes safety, yet at the same time people enjoying spending time together. So again, as I indicated, you saw one of our videos. You got the YouTube link last month. Despite the fact that we're still on hold mode for resuming our normal operations, we hope to be fully ready to go once we're able to do that. And we do have people that are sort of anticipating that maybe by summer 2021 they'll be able to have the kind of event that they want to celebrate something that's important in their lives. Also want to tell you about Trunk or Treat. I think that was mentioned at our last meeting. No, there was no real Halloween this year. However, the Police Activities League proposed to the County Public Health that they do a Trunk or Treat event. They used the Spencer Adams Park parking lot in order to do that, and we coordinated with them so that we both supported them, but they did most of the work. It was held between 5 and 8 o'clock, and it involved 23 different vendors. We had 250 children, ghouls and goblins, according to your report, participate and get a little bit of Halloween, do it outside, do it safely with their masks on, and appropriate handling of candy, and ensuring that we had all of the precautions in place. So another opportunity to find a little way to celebrate despite the situation we find ourselves in. I mentioned also recently the success of our camps over the summertime and the fact that we transitioned into after-school camp, particularly since children continued to distance learn through the fall. And we're very successful with a number of programs. Those ended the middle of October. And at the same, even while they ended, we still had more requests that we find some way to help parents engage their children in safe outdoor activities outside of the school day. And so we've implemented a couple more camps that will continue into December. One is a Saturday skate camp. We started skate camp on Saturdays some number of years ago, and it has been one of the successes at that location. So we've extended the skate camp that we had through December 12th. It's a 6-week program, and it really targets young kids, 6 to 11, the little ones that are learning how to skate. We can accommodate 14 campers in this program. And then we also continued the Lego camp. Lego camp's super popular. We have 2 afternoon 6-week Lego camps. So kids go once per week for 3 hours, and they're age 5 to 10 years. So again, that younger group of kids, way to get them out and about and socializing, yet doing it in a safe way and having some fun. So this will all wind up at the middle of December. As we know, the days are getting shorter and shorter, and we're heading into the end of the calendar year. In your January, perhaps your February report, you will hear that we will be planning for summer 2021. We've got lots of experience trying to figure out how to do it under the coronavirus pandemic requirements, but we're already thinking about what we can plan for and what we can try to implement under whatever circumstances we face ourselves in, because everyone will still need to get outside and recreate and play and find ways to rejoice during difficult times. So that basically concludes the report that I'd like to share with you on activities in our department.
Oh, well, thank you. And you're right, everybody still does need to find a way to get outside and recreate and rejoice, even though these can be really dark times. And I'm sure those 14 sets of parents of the skate camper kids found a lot of solace in that, and the kids who got to trick or treat when they thought there wouldn't be a Halloween, and the Lego Kim kids are all probably pretty grateful for the opportunities the department has offered them. So thank you for that. And thank you to Ricardo Venegas. Looks like he had a very busy month with murals and trunk or treating. And I think that all seated the ability to floor plan for events is also going to give people a little bit of sense of safety that they can plan a wedding or they can plan a party and, you know, make sure that they're socially distanced. I think every little thing you guys do is going to add up to something bigger. So thank you. Did anybody else want to say anything before we see if we can find Karen of the Sweet Gums?
I know everything that you're doing now takes probably 2 to 3 times as much work.
Yeah.
To figure out how to do it. And thank you to everyone involved for, you know, just keeping a good attitude and the parks open and places for people to be. I think the longer we're in this, and the harder it's getting on everybody. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
I have to say that we have a creative, dedicated group of staff across the board in this department, and we're finding new ways to reinvent how we do things and succeeding. And that always is a positive reinforcement. When, even if it takes extra work to make it happen, when we succeed, it always, you know, it's good positive feedback.
Yeah, and I guess it's an awesome team, but one of the benefits of this is just continually get community feedback as the community increasingly appreciates the importance of the parks and of the recreation programs. So hopefully we can leverage that going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Ms. Navarez, did we establish contact with the applicant?
So we're going to try it again, Chair Clark. Okay, we're getting to the right place here, so hold on a second here. Okay, now you're self-muted, Karen, if you can, Ms. McElwain, if you can unmute yourself. If we have figured out how to do that, hopefully. Oh, come on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Oh my
Beautiful.
gosh.
Okay, you have 2 minutes to speak, Ms. McElwain.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank Nathan first for calling me today and explaining a lot of things. But all 3 of the sweet gums are diseased to some extent. One is diseased to the point where it's losing its leaves and leaning over. Another one has a big area on its trunk that shows sap leakage or something like that. I would like to at least remove 2 of those trees so that I can replant another tree at that site. We currently are on, we are 1/3 of an acre, and we have at least 15 mature trees on our property. So it's not like we are lacking foliage here. I don't want to have to remove 1 tree each year, because that way I can't plant anything there, and I don't want to leave a big bare spot. So I would like to remove 2 of the most diseased trees, leave the 3rd tree, which is just starting to be diseased. Maybe it will improve With the other 2 trees gone, I don't know, but I would like to replant the area. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. And thanks for sticking with the technology long enough to have your say. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions of her while we still have her?
This is probably a question for Nathan, or I'm not sure who it's a
Okay.
question for. So the recommendation from STAC is to approve one with a street tree going in somewhere in the parkway. What I just heard the applicant propose is remove 2 and replant that specific area. So the question I have is, with a mature tree remaining, would that make, is that feasible, or would that make sense? Nathan, you're muted.
I think you may still be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That's so weird. It must be these things. Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, I think there's space on the property where certainly a suitable replacement tree could be located. It would be tough to kind of shoehorn in a new tree next to the existing sweet gum. If you were trying to plant something in that general area, it would be pretty crowded, like what's already present right now. But you know, a lot of that is the latitude usually in those situations is kind of up to the property owner in terms of placement and location of a new tree, especially within the front setback.
Are there any more questions? So just to clarify.
I do. I have some questions about the condition of those other 2 trees. What we're hearing from STAC is that the other 2 trees are in good health, reasonably good health, and what do you see for their future?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, I think to be definitive about the long-term sort of prognosis, there would be the need to probably do some more exploratory work. For example, the bleeding areas on the trunk that can be seen on the tree that's obviously stressed, and then the other tree that the applicant's talking about, really somebody would have to kind of chisel that away to see what the tissue underneath the bark looked like to really make a determination in regards to whether it was like a fungal canker or maybe it be symptomatic of something else. And then technically you would really, to be able to make a true determination on something like that, you would need to send samples to the laboratory. That's the only way to definitively know when you see these like lesions or cankers, these bleeding areas along the trunk. Based on the decline of the existing tree, it's difficult to say. I would say it's probably indeterminate in terms of trying to project out how quickly or if at all there will be decline. The bacterial leaf scorch, which I suspect is affecting the tree that looks to be in the poorest of shape, also seems to be somewhat hit or miss when it affects a certain species of tree. So it's very difficult to say. If there's cultural treatments like watering and mulching, and they do things to try to just boost the general vigor of the tree, it's reasonable for them to survive for quite some time. But without true understanding of what all is in play, it's kind of tough to say.
Thank you.
one last question. Would removing 1 versus 2 or 2 versus 1 trees make a material difference in the vigor and survivability of the third remaining tree or other neighborhood trees?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, there's not, to my knowledge, many, if any, more American sweet gums in the neighborhood. So I don't think it would have a profound impact on the neighborhood as a whole. It's arguable that the removal of the obviously stress tree would be of benefit to the remaining 2. Again, without having a true understanding of what the pathogen that's present is, it's difficult to say. I think there's maybe subtle signs of scorch, but then even during discussions between myself and some of the committee members, there was differing views on what actually might be affecting the trees. That's why, in order to really understand it, a lot of times you kind of have to drill down pretty deep and maybe even do some sampling, because there can be really overlapping symptoms. So it would be really difficult to say if the removal of the second tree would have a positive impact or not on the long-term health of the remaining tree.
Thank you.
Are we to comments?
I'm sorry, what?
Chair Clark, are we to comments now?
Yeah, you can make a comment.
Yeah.
There's some more questions.
Just from the view of the site and taking out 2 of the trees that have been growing so closely together, I think that third tree might be fairly awkward in its growth pattern and might not be aesthetically that beautiful. I am more comfortable leaving 2 of them and having the stressed tree removed. What I would like for the applicant, and I don't know if there's a way to do it, is to do this without prejudice, that the applicant would be able to come back to staff if there was something more involved, if the trees, they could apply again without having to pay the fee. They've done it twice. We're dealing with, what's going on here. But I don't feel like I want to condemn a second tree without knowledge of why we're doing it. When we've had the street tree advisory committee with arborists and our arborists out there, and we can't determine that tree has any reason to be taken down. So that's my comments on it.
I am in agreement with Commissioner Longstreet that the characteristic of the neighborhood might be materialistically affected if we took away that second tree. There's a lot of biomass right there. It's on the corner. It's pretty striking, but we don't know how long that will last. So I think denial without prejudice to see where that tree is ultimately headed would be something I would support.
So yeah, I'm kind of hearing the same, I'm leaning the same way, which is that if we approve the 1 tree and then they can come back without prejudice, because there just seems to be so many unknowns right with this. And I appreciate the applicant's desire not to piecemeal it. I really do.
Yep.
But hopefully without prejudice could help that along.
Because also in there, what the applicant had said for replanting was bushes, not trees. There was not tree replacement in it. I understand there's other trees on the property, but there are no other trees on that area, in that area. So I would be inclined to concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation and that the remaining 2 trees be saved, but without prejudice. Is that how we'd say that?
Mhm.
If there is, if further information becomes known.
Did you put the condition that for the removal of the one stress tree, the applicant install a designated street tree in the parkway adjacent?
Yes, I would. I think if we look down the road and we think that what's going to happen is these other 2 trees are going to, at some point, let's say 5 years from now, need to be removed. If we have a street tree in that's 5 years into its life, we're in better shape than if we've not replaced that tree. So it's important. You
I'll
can tell
second
the
that.
days I come off sea level rise because it makes me very conscientious about our biomass and what we're doing in our environment.
I will second your motion. Is there any discussion? Part of my discussion,
Is
I
that
just wanted
clear,
to,
Ms. I just wanted to make sure that's clear and okay with Mr. Slack and Ms. Zachary, that we're on an appropriate path.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I think that that's completely fine and probably prudent given the fact that the applicant has come forward, you know, respecting the process on multiple occasions. I think that that's more than fair to take that approach in the future.
Okay, thank you. Then
So we
that
have
was
a
tabled
mo-
as amendment.
yeah, we have a motion and a second. And just for discussion real quick, I wanted to clarify, I think Commissioner Longstreet, you said that she just wanted to replant with bushes, but when we did hear her speak, she did mention replanting a tree, I thought, but, so we did hear you speak. And we have a motion and a second. Other than my discussion, do we have any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
I
Opposed? So moved. Thank you, Mr. Slack. And that brings us to our proposed fiscal year 2022-26 Parks and Recreation Capital Improvement Program, and this is for action.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, your packet is fairly comprehensive. I'd like to spend a little bit of time walking through our current capital projects or ongoing projects and examples of requests and the rationale for those requests. We do, next slide, please. We do a 5-year CIP now, excuse me, every 2 years. And we really focus on the first 2 years of the 5 years. So you'll see that there's a lot in there. But really to look at why we're doing this is we want to create a comprehensive list of planned and projected needs. As part of that, we're considering the timeline it takes to design, to permit, to construct. And then we're beginning to estimate project costs and identify funding sources. That work effort takes a number of years, as we can see from the projects we implement over time. And so the 5-year process really gets us started down a path, and often we can amend it, which we do every 2 years based on the progress we've made in prior years. Next slide, please. So when we think about our capital improvement program, we have key considerations, and these are pretty consistent year on and year out. What are we currently working on, and what are those priorities? What are our ongoing unmet needs? We always have deferred maintenance. We always are looking at opportunities to address safety issues. We need to protect our sensitive resources. And then we do our best to respond to community demand where feasible in as timely a fashion as possible. And then we're also to some extent opportunistic, but then also strategic when it comes to funding. Is there general fund we think we might be able to secure? Are there grant opportunities that we anticipate are coming forward? Or are there other ways to leverage city funds, private funds, foundation funds? And then lastly, part of the CIP considerations are how are we planning for the future so that we're not just worrying about today and tomorrow, but we're trying to anticipate what the future needs will be, not really knowing exactly, but trying to get on the right track. Next slide, please. So when we look at Parks and Recreation specifically, we've got opportunities to renovate and maintain what we have to enhance our existing services. And that's always a high priority and a key objective. Our parks contain a lot of heritage, Santa Barbara heritage. How do we preserve that heritage and those resources? How do our CIP projects achieve that? Anticipating recreation trends, realizing that the community is changing, the community's use of outdoor and indoor spaces change. How do our CIP projects anticipate those change? And then there's changing demographics, particularly in neighborhoods, and then also based on age, any number of factors. And then sometimes we're really just trying to meet a regulatory requirement. And we have examples where we've done that in the past, where ADA laws change and we need to make sure we have a ramped entry into our wading pool at Oak Park. And so that project becomes a high priority so that we're meeting that community need. Next slide, please. So when you look at Parks and Recreation as a whole, we have 3 funds that hold capital projects. The general fund, for which the current 5-year CIP suggests we have up to 102 million in opportunities to enhance our Parks and Recreation services. We've identified 11 projects in fiscal year 22 and 20 in fiscal year 23 for fairly large sums of money to move them forward. And as I go through this presentation, you'll see why there's some big chunks of money. And then also looked at where we have funding, whether it's grants, general funds, or Measure C supporting funds. We also have the Golf Fund and we have the Creeks Fund. The Commission will receive a comprehensive presentation on the Golf Fund at your December meeting that will include detail about capital as well as how golf operations are going. And then also in January, we'll bring forward the Creeks Fund and the Commission will have an opportunity to learn more about the capital projects and priorities for Creeks, but also programmatically how that division and that program is doing. Next slide. So now I'd like to just walk through projects that we're proposing to continue with new funding in the next couple of years. Next slide. So Bonet Park field and access improvements. We are currently under construction right now, and the project will both build a creek stormwater treatment facility and improve park access, enhance our picnic and play areas, renew our landscape and turf. And then we recently completed renovating our restroom. What we aren't doing this year, because we don't have the funds to do it, is to expand the basketball court. And you can see in the slide, the sort of purple square right there. The plan that we are constructing will accommodate that future improvement when those funds are available. And the idea is that we not only have basketball, but we have other multi-sport court, multi-sports that can take advantage of this space. So I believe you can see the cursor on the screen. Is that true?
I don't.
Okay. Well, I will just describe for you. So key to the work that's under construction right now is the ramp that goes from the area that's the Boys and Girls Club, updating that, making it up to code for ADA, making it 1 ramp instead of 2 because we currently have 1. I mentioned we finished the restroom renovation this spring, and then the sort of brown orange line is the accessible pathway that will go around the park. The area to where we had the staircase that dropped down from San Pasqual, we've removed that because it is not ADA accessible, and we'll be putting in a group family picnic area. The playground we replaced about 3 or 4 years ago, and then we'll be making improvements to the picnic areas on the creek side, including putting in an accessible picnic area that people can access in the park. And then the green space, the turf area, the stormwater treatment facility is going right there. I was there a couple of weeks ago when construction started and spoke to a neighbor, and he wondered whether we were putting a swimming pool in. And I said, no, we're not. And I said, we have project signage. Did you get our postcard? And he hadn't, but it looks like we're putting a swimming pool in. But that won't be for long, because once they start pouring concrete, that will change. So we're anticipating the cost for the multi-sport court and lighting upgrades is about $400,000 based on the current estimate that we have. Proposing that we push it out to 2023 with the other priorities that we have in 2022. Next slide, please. And then Carrillo Gym, our favorite ancient gym, which opened to the public in 1927. Currently, the facilities division is working on some exterior repairs and hopefully dealing with the water intrusion problems that we've had for many, many years. Kind of just to, repair what's needed to be repaired right now. We're proposing to take the next step, which I've spoken with the commission about on a couple of occasions, and initiating a feasibility study. Again, looking at that in 2023 to get a sense of what are our options for renovating the interior of the building. Can we bring back the rooftop court? How do we achieve access improvements? How do we make the building even more usable than it is? Next slide, please. We're currently working on the Dwight Murphy Field Master Plan. It was approved by the commission and then council in 2018 and 19. We're in the process of the preliminary design. We recently submitted the design through the city's development application review process in collaboration with the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation. We hope that that work effort will be complete this fiscal year. In fact, we anticipate to have the entitlements for the project. And the proposal is next year in fiscal year 2022, we begin funding design development and construction documents for that project with the idea that by the end of the calendar year and or the beginning of 2023, 2024, we have a project ready to build. Next slide, please. Eastside Neighborhood Park, the Neighborhood Advisory Council received a detailed presentation on this project. I'm going to give you the short version. We've been talking about the need to renovate Eastside Neighborhood Park. It's one of our parks that suffered from misuse over a number of years. The city, the department has not reinvested in this park space for a long time, and it's very much in need of that and in need of creating a space that the neighborhood wants to use. So you'll see on the schematic and the slide some of the ideas that we have, which are difficult to read, but some of the approaches that we've been developing, and we've started a community engagement effort, and we will be continuing that beginning after the Thanksgiving holiday, where we'll be placing boards and soliciting input from people that go to the Franklin Center as part of the food distribution that are from that neighborhood to engage them in ideas and objectives for this park and share the concepts that we've developed thus far. Being unable to have a congregation of individuals in an indoor meeting room or even in an outdoor space, we thought this would be a better way to try to reach people because we can't have a formal meeting. So as you may be able to tell in the sort of gray squares where we're conceptually thinking we should move the playground. So bring it out to Soledad Street so it's front and center. Address the parking issues in front of the park there so that people can see into the park. Create more friendly access pathways into the park. Open up and clear out the picnic area so it's lit, it's open, it's friendly. Right now the trees are so extensive in there and it's quite dark that we need to create a more friendly place. What we've learned through the Bonet Park process is people bring their own tables and chairs to a lot of these things. So maybe we don't need to have stationary ones here. If we have a designated family gathering area, people can bring what they need in order to have that event. Doing some improvements to the turf. There's a dotted brown line that brings you in from Soledad, takes you to the playground, goes around the community gardens, improving access and pathways through the park, and then also creating a much nicer, more friendly entrance into the community garden off Soledad Street. So really trying to open the whole space up and make it an enjoyable place to be. We did receive just under $60,000 in community development block grant funding to renovate the restroom this year. Currently trying to secure the matching general funds to make it happen, which I feel confident we will do. And so we will move forward with that improvement this fiscal year. In fiscal year 22, we're suggesting, and we estimate, a full, redo of this park and really bring it to a community standard we think is important is about $750,000. We plan to apply for $350,000 in community development block grant funds, and then make the general fund request for $400,000 for the next fiscal year. But the idea is we can build and make this park ready to go by June 2022, because there's always that lag time, but we can start working towards its improvements right now. Next slide, please. Louise Lowry Davis Center, we are about to go out to bid for the exterior improvements. We have about $300,000 in CDBG funds for that project, and then about $1 million in Measure C for the exterior. The proposal is that we move forward with the interior renewal in 2023, and then we estimate it'll be another 1.3. Next slide, please. Ortega Park, the commission received an update and made findings on that project just recently. We, as I mentioned earlier, hope to be at the Planning Commission, will be at the Planning Commission in December, and that will give us the opportunity to move forward with the next phase of the project. We are proposing that we move forward and build the street right-of-way improvement. So that's along South Sequoias and Coda in the next fiscal year. So we're planning to apply for $300,000 in CDBG grant funds and request $1 million in Measure C funds, since it is really street-related pedestrian access improvements. By building these, it would not preclude continuing to operate the park as it currently is, but it would provide improved pedestrian access. It would achieve parking improvements that people have looked toward, and it would still allow us to finish the design work and the funding for the balance of the project. In 2023, we're proposing just over $8 million in funds. Recently submitted a grant application for $1 million. Are planning to submit one in March for up to $8 million to be able to build the field improvements, the picnic area, the playground, do the site demolition and other preparation. Next slide, please. West Beach Aquatic Facility. This project did have preliminary design underway. The funding was cut as we presented to the commission back in May due to COVID financial impacts in the last fiscal year. So the proposal here is that we return some funds to that project and restart design, and we do that in 2023. Next slide, please. New projects. There's always something new on the horizon. Next slide, please. So a couple of things that have been, they're not really new because they've been in our capital program for a really long time. But looking at the Alameda Plaza, and it needs significant renovation, increasingly concerned about the gazebo and accessibility and lighting, beginning to scope what that would take in 2023. Also hoping to find community partnerships to advance restoration of the gazebo while we're doing that. Next slide, please. Ambassador Park, Chumash Cultural Project. The commission received a presentation, an update on the fact that we are working on this project a couple of months ago. We are about to go to council to appropriate a $50,000 grant with the Coastal Conservancy to move forward with stakeholder engagement and preliminary design, which we would begin in the new calendar year and spend up to 18 months completing that. So proposing that construction could be, and this is just a placeholder amount to implement the project since we haven't fully defined what that would be. And we've been working with and talking to the Coastal Conservancy and stakeholders about how we would seek grant funds to do whatever improvements that we end up achieving at Ambassador Park. So this project, as of today and hopefully into the future, would be entirely grant funded, supported by city staff. So that would be our match for that project. Next slide, please. Central City Recreation Center. We've talked about this over and over and over again, and really looking at all the spaces we have available and the opportunities and the needs in the downtown, proposing that we begin to really master plan Spencer Adams Park. That's our last big space that is in need of kind of a sort of a revision and undertake the kind of stakeholder process we did for Ortega Park and Dwight Murphy, keeping in mind the existing uses that we have on the site, and yet the opportunity to enhance the space that's underutilized, including the parking lot, and how to better program indoor, outdoor opportunities and recreation for all ages. Next slide, please. Chase Pond Park renovation, ongoing project. We had funds, or thought we had funds from the former RDA. Then it was uncertain. Looks like we still have those funds. So the proposal in the next fiscal year is to use those funds to move forward with the Arbor project, which the city is committed to, and at the same time looking at access upgrades and renewal of Casa Las Palmas. So that whole area within the park, looking at that as a focal point. Was just on a meeting call with Public Works and also talking about renovating the restroom that's adjacent to the playground. It gets lots of love. It's been there for 22 years and it's time for a little bit of a facelift. And we also know that there are access upgrades that we need to do. 22 years have passed. Next slide, please. Plaza Del Mar band shell. So this really is a new project, and it's came about during COVID. We had the Santa Barbara Folk Orchestra approach us, querying whether they could participate in the renovation of the building in order to provide an outdoor concert venue. During the time of COVID, makes a lot of sense to enhance our outdoor spaces wherever we can. So I thought, great, let's go do that. We went to do an inspection, and suffice to say, we need to do a lot of work to make it concert worthy in terms of being able to host small concerts. We recently completed a preliminary structural assessment of the building. Quite a bit of deterioration has occurred in the structure. Unfortunately, you can't see that from the outside, but once you dig around, it's pretty evident. So we're working this fiscal year, on trying to secure at least funds to complete the construction drawings, and then hopefully in the next fiscal year, matching grant funds and general funds actually complete the improvements and turn it back into an outdoor concert venue that hopefully would be permissible even during times of when we're concerned about people congregating. It's a neat space. The acoustics actually are pretty awesome, and it would be wonderful to return it back to what it was used for in the past. Next slide, please. Plaza Veracruz renovation. We've discussed this with the commission on and off over the years. With the pandemic, we chose to take certain steps, including removing the playground, which had become a haven for misuse and certainly was not used by young children. Remove hardscape that was not necessary. Parks Division staff have been renovating the turf, fixing the irrigation. We're working on the landscaping, and really want to take a close look at, how can we make further improvements at that park. Hopefully, in the new calendar year, we'll be able to host some youth practices, field sport practices, and get some positive activity in there. We plan to keep it fenced for the time being because that allows us to get in and out and do the kind of work we need to do to enhance the park. Forestry staff actually went in and spent a number of days trimming the trees there as well. So that was a huge improvement. Next slide, please. Municipal Tennis Center rehabilitation. We have our new playground. We've got, nice features. there. We've talked on and on and on about how we need to sort of go to the next stage of replacing the stadium and the courts, short-term install court lighting. 2023, this is funding we actually proposed for this year and it got put on hold to look at installing more court lighting at the tennis courts. We do have funds from the Stern Family Trust that we would use to implement this project, so it wouldn't necessarily take funds from another source. Next slide, please. So ongoing programs, just to remind us all the different things that we're just doing around the edges where we can. Next slide, please. You know, we're always looking for playground replacement opportunities, park infrastructure safety projects. We find little projects that we can do here and there. We have some park irrigation system projects in the CIP. They're there really to remind us we need to do them. We often find we do them in association with larger projects. But I can also say Pershing Park is a prime example where at some point we really need to address that irrigation. And then also medians and parkways, we're beginning to use Measure C funds to make improvements there, as well as implement aspects of our urban forest management plan. So the funds you see proposed in your staff report related to that, we would propose be Measure C and really street improvement related. This year we have $250,000 that we'll be using for projects, hoping to actually increase that over time and make it consistent so that we're not only dealing with some significant backlog of maintenance due to a lack of funds, but also planting that next generation of trees throughout city streetscapes. Next slide, please. And then open space planning, just want to sort of bring that back to the fore because we now have our open space associate planner back on board. Next slide, please. And we do have projects that have started that are waiting on the wings. We are moving forward with the Palmer Park Sustainable Trails project, hope to be actually doing some trail work next year. We have had requests for Hale Park. We know we need to come up with a new development plan for the Douglas Family Preserve related to trails and habitat preservation. And then Franceschi Park is always a park where beginning to look at how to manage those open spaces in addition to addressing the house and the concepts around creating an open pavilion. Next slide, please. And with that, if I could go to the final slide. Next, excellent. So what we're asking from the commission today is your feedback on our overall approach. It's a lot to digest. Your staff report really distills it down into projects and amounts. I wanted to share with you some more of the perspectives and whether the commission has wants to take action on specific projects proposed for the next 2 years. The CIP, as always, goes to the Planning Commission and City Council. And then ultimately by April, when we come back to the commission, there's a set of staff recommendations regarding CIP. As usual, we always have way more projects we want to do than there will be funds to do. So sometimes it's strategic, opportunistic, and we don't know what kind of general fund allocation there will be in fiscal year 22 based on how the economy is doing. That said, the approach of this department has always been to plan and to be ready. And if the funds become available or we can secure them in other ways, we can move our projects forward. With that, I think that's the next slide, the last slide. That concludes, well, I said the next steps. Maybe we could go back to the last slide if you would. Concludes my presentation. Happy to take questions, comments, direction from the commission.
Okay, thank you. I think we're all going to have a lot to say. I guess we're going to start. What you're asking from us is our recommendations based on approach projects and priorities. So we'll go one by one. But before we get to that, does anybody have any questions, or let's incorporate our questions into our recommendations. So I'm going to start with Commissioner Longstreet.
Okay. Thank you. Some familiar projects that we've had for years and years. as I look to the next 2 years, I see that we are not going to have any money. That's, I think, what we're all prepared for. But I also think back to 2008 when we went through and it was tough. And having the project shovel ready meant when money came down from the federal government to stimulate the economy, there were projects that were ready to move to the front of the line. And I see that by this list, we have them again. And that continued work, I believe, or I hope, will pay off in the same way again. So the list is very daunting, but in there, there's going to be some jewels of opportunity, I'm hoping, in the next couple of years that really can move forward. And my hope is that these neighborhood park projects move to the top, because that's who we serve, and that's who we want to recreate and be safe. So I'm totally supportive of the East Side Park, Bonet Park, all of the Alameda Park. I mean, that's a neighborhood also. So those are important. I would want in our recommendations to council to have them keep in the front of their minds as they're working on State Street and the redevelopment of downtown and all the great drawings and AIA stuff that's coming out, that the recreation aspect of that needs to be part of good community living. So Veracruz Park becomes extremely important. Looking at what we can do at for a West Side Center area, how we deal with having it. We have a gym downtown that we don't think about, but that is a space, especially if you have, basketball kind of folk, that we have it and we need to be able to maintain it and use it. The band shell, wouldn't that be great? I mean, that is a historic piece of our community. It also needs to be thought of as we redevelop State Street, as parades move off State Street and onto Cabrillo Boulevard. That's going to become an important gathering place. So renovations to that area should be very much in the forefront of all of these kinds of planning. We can't just look at State Street alone. We have to look at how that moves out into the community. Of course, what always rises to the top is safety. And I think that's always the projects, that staff has at the top of the list, the ADA accessibility projects. And I read through this list with a lot of interest. I find it hard to believe we have to redo Chase Palm Park aspects already, because that was built on when I sat on this commission. So I'm fully in support of this list. I think it is just simply a guideline, and that we will see moving on from that what we can fund and how, but all of them need to be done. There's not a frivolous project in here, I don't think. You might look at something like the splash pad and say, well, we could live without that. You know what? No, we can't. We maybe can live without pirate ships on it, but we can't live without the splash pad itself. We need all of those projects. I was interested in the new aspect, this new format, and the drivers at the bottom of the projects. I thought that was very, very interesting and helpful, and brought that up at Sea Level Rise today, because as we move forward in the future, that needs to be one of the drivers we incorporate into projects. So Thank you. I am, keeping my fingers crossed that in a matter of months, there'll be some sort of funding coming down from the federal government to support communities and that we will be in line to further some of these projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Longstreet. Commissioner Lesnar Buxton?
Yes, thank you. I'm in favor of all the projects. I think it's really daunting task, but this department is used to daunting task. The one question I have is when the Davis Center is retrofitted, where will all the programs go during the renovation that as a social service provider on the west side, the Davis Center has been invaluable for our seniors, and I'm just growing about a prolonged reservation would affect that will have on the services. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lesnar Buxton. Ms. Zachary, did you, I think he had a question about when the Louise Lowry Davis Center reopens, and I didn't quite get it.
I think Commissioner Lesnar Buxton and Chair Clark, I think if I recall, you've had this question before, and it's perfectly appropriate to continue to bring it up. That the concern that access to and use of the Davis Center would change with the renovation, and it would be less accessible or less usable by members of the community. Am I correct in that?
During the reservation, I'm just wondering where we would put everything during the year or so we have to renovate it.
Okay. So I think some concerns about doing when the center is reserved for other events, perhaps what would happen to
I'm sorry, I apologize, I couldn't hear. Whether
during the renovation, I'm concerned about what will happen to the programming when you're fixing the building up.
Oh, when that's actually construction? Yeah, Commissioner Lesnar Buxton, the programming, we would relocate the programming. We've always have a plan that well, for starters, the exterior will be done before we can probably open the interior. So unfortunately, we have no programming now. If we're successful in securing funds to do the interior, and it would be a shame not to do that, we would relocate any programs that we have to the West Side Center or to Career Rec, or if we needed to find another location, we would do that as well. It's definitely first and foremost in our mind how we make sure we provide a continuity of services to the extent feasible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair McGill?
Well, I mean, largely, I'll second a large portion of what Commissioner Longstreet said. The one thing, and I know I've had this conversation before, I struggle with the idea of getting so many things shovel ready, which to my mind dilutes budgets, and wouldn't it be better to just concentrate the money on the top priorities? And Director Zachary and I have had this conversation before when I started out, and I understand the dilemma there. I truly understand the dilemma of wanting to focus the resources to really get stuff done versus needing to be ready to get funding. I appreciate that you walk that tightrope, daily. But yeah, to the degree that we can focus resources on the key items, I think that's great. I agree, those key items, to my mind, I think of it as neighborhood centers, neighborhood areas that serve neighborhoods, areas that serve, I'd say, underserved communities, whether it's youth, elderly, whatever. And then also the gateway areas for the city. I think that's really important to focus time and attention on the things that make us distinctive. So serving communities and taking care of our gateways. I have a personal passion for the open areas since I'm in them constantly. I read some of the budgets for some of the open areas, and they seem like relatively small budgets for what's in them, particularly when it says property acquisition. And I say, $1 million, and you're going to buy land around here? Okay, so yeah, I worry that those are a little bit underestimated, which will make them more challenging in the future. And this is really small beer, and excuse me. The Parks and Rec master plan that you've got for, I don't know, a couple of years out. It's small, and I know it's kind of been on your wish list forever. And it's not a ton of money, but it could be a ton of time and energy and thought. And it's one of these things that it's a great and wonderful idea. The way budgets are, the way the world is right now, it feels like the horse will constantly have bolted. And I don't know, it's kind of like, of course you want to do it, but is it really ever going to give you what you need? Given that you're always just chasing these crazy budgets. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Martinez-Cohen.
Yes, I will echo a lot of what Bibi and Kathy mentioned. I also am in, huge support of the neighborhood park renovations to the extent that we are, trying to prioritize funding. I think those ones, for me, always rise to the top as well. I think having things ready, is important. I do think trying to get everything to that point where when you get the funding, you can actually apply for it and get it is very, very important. So again, I do understand that there's a lot of prioritization, going on as far as what you put the money toward. But I definitely think those neighborhood parks are really important. And, especially that East Side neighborhood park, it's a big one. I live East Side, so I'm definitely going to always highlight those things. And my daughter actually goes to the Montessori school right across the street. And next year we'll hopefully be going to Adelante, which is also right across the street. So we actually go to that park probably like 4 or 5 days a week after I pick her up. Well, once it finally reopened. But usually when we pick her up, we go across the street and play. And there's some other kids that usually do that from her school as well. And, at first I was, a little hesitant. It doesn't feel safe. I'll just say that. It is really dark and things like that. There's always, some misuse going on there. But at the same time, there is plenty of people like me who really do use it. So, it's just one of those things. It's a mixed bag scenario. And I'm not going to forego my use of that park because of some other things that might be going on there. But I could see how some attention, a little TLC renovation of this park would go a long way. And I can tell it hasn't been renovated in a really long time. I'm not sure the history. I think you mentioned that, but yeah, I think, so to another point I would just make is to the extent that we're prioritizing funding and different parks, I think it is important to look at how long it's been since anything has been renovated in that area or in that particular park. I think those ones should also rise to the top of the list when we're looking at, again, prioritizing those funds. So I do love that. I would love to see that on there. We will, be in that neighborhood for a long time. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing that park in particular renovated. But I mean, having a 4-year-old, we frequent parks, all of them, all the time, everywhere. I think all these parks on here I go to pretty regularly, especially the ones that have good parks, or good playgrounds with like monkey bars and stuff. She's really into that right now. But so, I mean, those things are just really important to have outdoor areas for children and families. Is so important, and especially during tough times like these when there's not a lot of other options, there's not a lot of other places to go, you're sort of pent up. I think those places of recreation are extremely important for a lot of demographics of families that live in the area. And yeah, thank you for the work. I think this is a great overview. I do also appreciate, like kind of what BB said, seeing those drivers at the bottom of these profiles of each project. It's great to see, what the driver is, whether it's public safety or maintaining infrastructure, modernizing facilities, ongoing maintenance. Those are good reasons. I like to see that. Helps to put things in context. So thank you.
Thank you. I was just, as you guys were all talking, I was just noticing and kind of grateful for the fact that, and I hope that council notices it when they listen to our recommendations, that we kind of represent our community. You've got BB, who takes care of seniors. I mean, she knows the needs of that community, as do I, with being a nurse for cardiac patients. And there's Kathy, who's always in our open spaces, and Andre, who's got the little kids, and Jacob, who champions accessibility. And then I used to have little kids, and they used to go all the parks, and now my kids are teenagers and using the skate park. And everything I think we've got on this commission right now, I'm really grateful for it. I never stopped and thought about that. But to the questions, what do I think about the department's approach to the CIP? When I looked at it and read everything, I felt like everything fit into one of 3 categories. It was either maintenance renovation, deferred maintenance renovation, or safety or community. And I can't think of a better way to approach our recreation and park needs. All of the projects that were either maintenance or renovation in my mind need to be done, because if you look at the costs of new versus now, like what we invest in it now, as opposed to what we're going to have to put into it in 5 or 10 years if we don't invest right now, it's going to turn that deferred maintenance into demolition. We just won't be able to do it. So one of my priorities is anything that is maintaining what we have or renovating it, that's got to happen. Because we're not going to be able to replace it, at least not anytime in the near future. Safety, almost all of the park projects, the park renovation projects, Eastside, Ortega, it all boils down to safety and repurposing. We don't need to wait until a kid steps on a needle to get funding. I mean, we need to be proactive and preventative. We need to make those dead spaces light and open and inviting, or else people aren't going to use them, and we've lost those too. And then the community building, I see projects like most of the projects, but even little ones like the band shell, we've lost our ability to recreate together outside of our pods. And looking to the open space plan like you've done, and looking to places like the band shell, I mean, that's going to give us a little bit of light in this darkness. If the pandemic continues to roll like it's been rolling, we have to find creative ways, and like renovating the band shell is a creative way of regaining a little bit of what gave us joy in former lives. And just like BB was saying with the splash pad, it is needed. We've got to find a place for people to rejoice. I absolutely think it's needed. And the splash pad and median projects, parts of Santa Barbara look pretty derelict. And you walk past the waiting pool that could be a splash pad, you don't want to really come back to this town, do you, and be a tourist and stay in a hotel. But if you walk past a vibrant splash pad with kids running all around, you'd be like, oh, wow, this is a great place for a family vacation. I'm going to bring my family here. Quarantine myself for 2 weeks and then bring my family here. So I think I think those projects, those need funding too. And the dog parks, okay, dogs are dogs, dogs aren't kids, dogs aren't people, but a lot of people are finding solace in their animals right now. So I think looking at new off-leash areas, maybe not a priority, but it's something to put in the back of your head that those areas are giving people a lot of joy right now. I have yet to go by the Mackenzie Park Dog Park and not see it full of people and dogs. Kind of standing 10 feet away from each other like this, but it's still full of people and they're still interacting to some extent. And the skate park, there's a skate park plan in here, looking for some funding to investigate other places to put another skate park. The report is correct. The current downtown skate park, it takes a lot of different kinds of people in there. There's little kids, there's teenagers, there's people on their BMX bikes, and it's no longer meeting the needs of that community. And that community is a bunch of angst-ridden teenagers mixed in with adults and small kids, and it's a good idea to maybe separate it out if possible right now. So thank you. I think this was, I also agree with Commissioner Longstreet that everything in this list is valuable and viable and important. And I echo everything that everybody else has said. Did anyone have anything else to say? I think you're
I would just add that tourism is a big part of our economy, and we all get that. But the places people want to visit are the places that serve their own community.
Mhm.
And so as long as we keep our community in the forefront and serve our adults, families, children, dogs, if that's the community people want to come to, is a happy place. So that's what I see this list bringing to us. The other part of this list, and a bit to Commissioner McGill, is all these things won't happen. All these things won't go to what won't ever or have it risen to a level of planning. But boy, we have to keep a reminder that, and we have to keep that reminder in front of the decision makers higher up than us of what we have to maintain. It's like, you look at your house, you can't only paint the front of it. So with that, do you need a recommendation, a motion from us to accept this and move it forward to planning? Ms. Zachary?
Chair Clark and commissioners, it would be great to have a recommendation from you to move it forward to the Planning Commission and Council. And there's parks that aren't on this list that are gems in neighborhoods. The Orpit parks aren't on this list. Mission Historical Park's not a priority in the next 2 years, but we certainly could reinvest in that space. We have a lot of area to manage, and that's the challenge we face as a department, is our resources are slim. And so how do we juggle them all? We do have a lot of projects on our list. Some of them are only eligible for certain sources of funds. So we want to keep CDBG eligible projects on our list so that we can continue to try to secure funds to advance them while we're still dabbling in something over here and doing something over here. So part of it is trying to be strategic in terms of how to leverage as much resource as we can beyond the limited general fund resources that we have. So I appreciate, all of your comments is super, super helpful, and the support of the commission is critical to the success of our department.
Well, I would move that we recommend this CIP program to the Planning Commission and Council with comments.
I'll second that. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you.
So just one last thank you, which is I got of decades of reading budgets. Your budgets are actually fairly easy to read and understand, and I appreciate that.
Thanks. I hope everybody has a wonderful, very socially distant and safe Thanksgiving. I'll adjourn. See you guys.
Same to you. Thank you.
Thank you.